Good evening, everyone. Look, I think most people are on now, so we might make a start. So it's great to have you all here this evening. Pre-COVID, no one ever thought this would be possible. So I guess how we look and communicate has certainly changed. So we've had a lot of changes going on in Xero in terms of our technology and what we're doing across all our clients, but particularly in the farming area. And so we thought tonight was just a really good opportunity to go through and give you a brief overview of what's done and how this can benefit your business. So just in regard to operating Zoom, so what we're going to do, we've got 3 or 4 sessions that we're going to run. And so if you've got any questions as you go, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, ask questions. But at the end of each session, we'll also we'll answer those questions, and then at the end, we'll open up all the mics. So if there's any other questions, we can have more of a informal discussion. So perhaps on that, so today, as you heard, I'm Mike Medlicott, and along with me, I have Chris Greenslade. So I think most of you have either met one of us in your dealings. And to take us through all the technology, we've got Adam and Raymond that will be talking throughout the session as well. So thanks for all coming along. In terms of the industry, I think the following sort of slide really demonstrates where we are at the moment. So banking is a different world than what it was 12 months ago, not only in the farming area, but right across the nation. And it's particularly partly in response to COVID, but it's partly in the changing of the banking environment. And so in terms of agriculture, we've had issues where we've got increasing debts over the last 10 to 15 years, and banks are now increasingly having much stricter requirements around lending. And so more and more, they're looking at farm financial management to ensure that clients can service their debt and they can be happy from a risk perspective. So the days of sort of having interest-only loans are pretty much gone, and banks, in a lot of cases now, are looking to have loans repaid over a 20-year period. So it's certainly changing times in that regard. The other area which I think everyone's been hit with, but certainly in the primary sector, is around compliance and regulations. And while we've always had the regulations around tax and payroll and all those sorts of requirements, I think the areas around where you're really being further hit is around environmental plans, farm tracing, and all these various things that you're now being required to undertake. And so when we look at some of the software this evening, you will see how we can use some of that to not only meet your tax requirements, but also help in planning for that. And I guess the final area around our industry is around commodities and price fluctuations, and also Mother Nature. Those are things that have always been part of agriculture, but I think when you look at the other two slides, the other two parts of the slide, that it's increasingly important that we're managing that, keeping the bank on side, and also ensuring that you're achieving your business plans that you're wanting to do. So without going any more into that, I'm now going to hand over to Adam, who's going to show us Hubdoc, which is the online filing system, filing cabinet. So hand over to you, Adam.
Cool, thanks for that, Mike. So just if you want to think of Hubdoc, just think of it more as your electronic filing cabinet. It's essentially, it doesn't just have to be the suppliers, but you can also upload any of your compliance documents. And then, so you can just email them in, upload them, or have the system fetch the bills from certain suppliers for you. Hubdocs will then automatically organize these documents based on the suppliers by essentially reading the document. And then you can further group them with tags to keep all those sort of certain compliance documents nice and easy for like finding them later. So if we just jump into our sort of demo company invoice, I'll just hop straight into the system so you can have a quick look at it. So as you can see, I've uploaded it in, it sits there nice and clean to be easily seen. When we click on the show folders in our uploads, it's automatically been tagged into the demo company folder. So you don't ever have to worry about this getting unorganized. It's always going to be organized based on your suppliers. I've tagged this as project 2. Essentially, if I clicked on project 2, it would pull up all those documents based on that project. And so they're easily ready to be found. When you click on the edit documents, this is where you'll see that sort of time saving features. So the total amount got pulled essentially from reading it. The date has been pulled, the supplier and the type of invoice. So basically it's already read it, grab the information, and all you have to do is configure sending it to Xero. So you would either save the configuration so that it comes through the same every time, but it still gives you a chance to review it. Or you can auto sync it for those that don't change. So if you think of your telephone bills and everything, they're not going to change month on month. You can just auto sync and have the system just basically push it into your Xero, and you won't ever have to think about it again, essentially. So I've configured this to go through to Xero earlier, and you can see it just shows through matched, nice and ready for reconciliation. The other point to know for Hubdocs is that it has a great mobile application for iOS and Android. You can use this to add documents via the phone, so just taking photos, but you can also search through your tags and folders for those relevant documents on the go. So I'm not sure, Mike, but I wondered if there are any questions that came through on just Hubdocs.
Yeah, there are a couple of quick questions. So one of them is actually, if we were to have a GST audit, do we still need to keep all our original invoices, given now that some are sort of coming in paper and some are coming by email and the like?
Well, as you said, because you addressed it, because they're coming through paper and email, the electronic copy is sufficient these days. So you can just have them all backed up on Hubdocs. They've got strict security, bank level security, so it's always going to be secure. And as long as you can prove it for the IRD, you've got that documentation of where it came from. Okay,
good. I noticed you've talked about linking with Xero, but I think there's one or two people on tonight that might not be using Xero, might be using Concept Cash Manager or what have you. Can the system be used on its own without?
Yes, it can. It can obviously be used as a storage device. You just wouldn't use the sync or push function. You can obviously still back it up to another cloud-based program or a QuickBooks. But if you weren't doing that, you can just archive it and use it as sort of your electronic storage, essentially.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. I will now pass this back on to Raymond, who will carry on with Figured.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. So Figured is the software we recommend to our clients to record and monitor all farming transactions with quantities attached to them. So this is the likes of your livestock purchases and sales, your per kg milk solids, and your crop quantities. Figured also has a very powerful reporting tool, which we'll cover as well. So the three main features that we'll cover today are your livestock reconciliation. So we'll just run through a quick example of reconciling a livestock transaction. The second point will be budget reporting. That's preparing your budgets and running budget versus actual reports. And thirdly, we'll look at scenario planning. So that's focusing on your longer term outcomes. So if I just hop into Figured. So to use Figured, you must have an active Xero subscription, as the data from Figured is directly driven from Xero. Xero talks directly to Figured, so that if you have a transaction coded to a livestock code in Xero, Figured will pick this up and let you know that you have to add a corresponding livestock transaction in Figured. I'll just show you an example here. So if we hop into our beef cattle tracker, so it comes up with this warning message. It's saying that there's an inconsistent balance between Figured and Xero. So it's picked up that there's something in Xero and there's no corresponding transaction in Figured. So if I click here, this will take me to Xero. And then we can see what's been coded in your sale of mixed age cows. So you can see that there's a sale of 5 mixed age cows. So we need to add that corresponding transaction in Figured. Cool, so you just need to enter in the dates. The contact's optional. And then you pick out your stock class. That's mixed age cows, and the quantity was 5. And you just need to enter in the amount, and it's GST exclusive. So once you hit save, that pushes the transaction through into Figured, and now you can see that the warning message has disappeared. Up the top right here, you've got your add actuals. So this is where you can also add in your natural increases and your deaths and your missing. So once you've gone through and added those, you've got this sort of tracker summary at the front. You've got your opening balances, and you've got your movements, year-to-date movements, and then you end up with your estimated closing stock on hand. And this is really important when you're going to try access bank funding, is the banks want to know what your closing stock on hand is. I'll just quickly show a report that you can run and bring to the bank, and it's your tracker summary. So you can change that to beef cattle. Sweet, so you can see here that you've got your beef cattle tracker, and this will print nicely to PDF. And then you can see your purchases and your sales summaries, and it's got all the average values on them. So that's really nice and handy to take to the bank. The second point we'll cover today regarding Figured is the budgeting tool. So Figured has a very powerful budgeting tool where you can chop and change numbers quite easily. I'll just hop into the planning grid. So you can see here that there is already pre-populated data, and what I've done is I've actually imported last year's actuals data and imported them into our current year budget, and Figured makes this really easy to do. So it's really really handy as a sort of like a starting point, and then you can go in here and you can chop and change. You've got your income at the top, and then you've got expenses down the bottom, and you can see that if you just click into the boxes, you can type in your figures, and you can actually spread them across 12 months, so you don't have to go in each box and type in an individual number. This is so basically once you're happy with your budget, you can take a snapshot, and basically what that does is it takes a snapshot of the current budget that you're working on, and it freezes it. You can't edit that snapshot, but what you can do is if you're looking to change the numbers, you can change the numbers and take a new snapshot. All your snapshots are stored here. You can see that we had our original budget, and then we sort of wanted to change them, so we've changed our budgets for different scenarios. You can see here for our budget number 1, we've set that as our annual plan. So that's sort of our main budget that we want to track against for the year, and this inputs into the system. So once you've done your budget, you can run your actuals versus budget reports, and this is really handy to take to the bank for funding. It also helps with decision making. You can see how you're tracking against your budget, and you can see you can ask yourselves the questions: are you tracking on budget? If not, why not? What changes do we need to make? Do we need to actually update our budget for different scenarios, and sort of similar things like that. So if I hop into our reports, in our variance report, so you can see in this column here, we've got your year to date, so you've got your actuals, and this pulls directly from Xero, and we've got our budget that we set up for the month. So you can track the differences down this column here. Your red means negative, green means positive. And then in this column here, so this is sort of what sets Figured apart from all the other softwares, is you've got your this column here, your actuals plus forecast. So this is where you can reforecast data. If you're thinking that something will change throughout the year, you can go in and edit your budget, and this will pull through to your actuals plus forecast to see what that change would do if you were to make any changes in the future. We can actually see here in this example with the milk prices. So Figured is actually connected to Fonterra, so all the latest milk prices will flow into Figured. We can see here that we originally budgeted for a certain milk payout, and then now we've updated our prices. The quantities stayed the same, but the price has changed, and then we can see that the milk income's changed. And you can see based on that change, where we'll end up at the end of the year, and you can track that down in your bottom line down here. You can also change this to a cash flow version. And that will show your cash movement, your opening and then your closing. So you can see that is a positive result based on the increased milk payout. And this could be done for not just income. You can change your budgeted expenses and see how they will affect basically your rolling forecast. So next we'll look at scenario planning, which Chris will look at. So I'll hand it over to Chris.
We've just got a couple of queries, perhaps, Raymond, on that beforehand before we jump into that. So,
Yes.
yeah, I guess can you just quickly go back to that report? Thanks.
Yep.
So, yeah. So the question is when and how you would be using this, and I guess the key thing is what a lot of people they would set the budget at the start of the year with the bank, and then as they do their GST, they would then update their budget for any changes. So for example, where Raymond showed the change in milk price, or for example, if some stock that were going to be sold 1 month weren't sold until later, you could push that back. And I guess the real advantage with this, and which is what the banks like about it, is that you can manage your position to see that you're still on target for the full year. And if things change, like this last year with the drought and what have you, you can make various changes to actually ensure that you're still going to hopefully get to the end result that you like. So it's one of the real strengths of it. And what we're finding with clients who are using this is that you can either use it, you can do it yourselves, or we can be involved if we're helping you with the GST and do those budgets and do that reporting, rather than sort of waiting to the end of the year to see how things are gone when we prepare the annual accounts and either getting a surprise or good or bad. So, yeah. Well, thanks, Raymond. We might get on to you, Chris.
Pass it over to Chris, who will go over scenario planning.
Thanks, Mike and Ray. So the scenario planning tool within Figured it's all about planning a bit further out into the future. So it's based on a 5-year period as opposed to your budget, which is usually one. And what this does is it really sort of nails down what will happen over a longer period if you do, say, the status quo. So where you may put in the last sort of 12 months and spread that across the next 5 years, where does that put you? If that doesn't put you where you want to be, then you can look at what a budget would be like, and again spread that across the 5 years, and again working out your position. One of the things we really quite like it for is around your actual scenario planning, and by that we mean project-based plans. So we've run an example here around an irrigation scheme or an upgrading your irrigation, but it could be for anything, for little changes. It might be for buying that runoff block, or moving away from a runoff block to grazing off farm, that kind of thing. And so it gives you a bit of an idea of, okay, if we make this change, what does it look like in the long term? The other thing that's quite handy for, and this one is again feeding back into our banking requirements, is actually combining up your trading entity, if you have a partnership or a company that runs the actual farm, as opposed to if you have maybe a trust that owns the land. So it gives you an overall position if you to group them up, and what it looks like in a few years' time if you farm a certain way. So within this, we have the profit and loss, and within here you'll see that it's quite compressed. So we literally just have income, your farm working with the operating expenses and a few other bits. It can be spread out as much as you like or as little as you like. For this type of planning, you will have probably done a lot of the analysis already of the minor stuff, each expense line is. So it's good to be able to compress it down and have a look on a global position, as opposed to having too many numbers in front of you, which can be quite hard to follow for you when you're doing that. And so this one's compressed down to your overall income, and this one is based on a dairy farm. Overall income, operating expenses being your farm working, and then the likes of lease, depreciation, interest, and tax. So we kind of putting out the things that you really need to be looking at on a global scale. And so with this one here, you can see that we have our first year as our status quo, and then we roll into a irrigation scheme proposal where we're spending say $1 million on buying into the irrigation scheme in the area and upgrading our irrigation. So within that, we've expected a little bit of an increase in income, bringing our farm working back, and down below you can see the depreciation being the irrigation, depreciating over time, and the additional interest costs with that loan. And so as you can see at the bottom, on this current forecast we're looking at being roughly the same profit, just slightly improving over the years. What really is quite good in Figured is being able to then roll straight into actually what it means for cash, because sometimes we get a bit lost in the profit and loss and doesn't actually tell us what's happening at the bottom line in the bank account. So this cash flow pulls the same information through, but takes out the stuff that's not cash, being depreciation, and brings in a couple of the other things, being the drawings, and in this case the loan repayments, which is their non-operating movements. And so it's quite handy to have this, because you often end in a profit and loss scenario looking like we're making some money, but by the time we've drawn some money out and then repaid some debt, we aren't looking so good in the bank account. So this gives us a nice compressed picture that in this case bank account looks pretty good over the years as we go away from an overdraft into a positive bank position. But it's good to be able to see what will happen over a long period of time, especially around that increase in having to make loan repayments, because that one there really can sneak up on you if you're not ready for it. From there, we have a balance sheet out of it as well. So what does it do to your balance sheet over that 5-year period? The key ones in this one is our bank under the current liabilities moving from overdraft into a current asset. And then the increase in assets being your irrigation buy-in, depreciating over time, and then our loan down the bottom, which is the one that can be the scary number. And you can see this one here shows how it gets repaid over time. So you get to a point where hopefully we're in a bit more of a comfortable position. It's usually pretty uncomfortable in that initial big outlay. And what we also have from this is a summary report that kind of takes all 3 reports together. It's quite good to look at that last, because it's a bit confusing if you haven't looked at the initial stuff first. But the main item on this one is, for the dairy farming perspective anyway, is that it's breaking it down to a per kg of milk solids. So you can get a bit of an idea of hopefully if your numbers are realistic or not, and so what your farm working would look like, or in this scenario it looks a little bit light. It'd be quite nice to be able to hit that level, but it's that kind of thing that does help us reasonableness test our scenarios. The main thing with this is actually looking at where you want to be in 5 years, so that we're not just grinding away year in, year out and don't have an end goal in mind. Any questions rolling through there, Mike?
Yeah, probably there's one just quick question here in terms of how, in terms of the banks, you know, how do they view a budget such as this compared to the sort of normal annual 1-year cash flow, I guess?
It really demonstrates to the bank that you've actually got a plan over a long period of time, so that you're not just looking at the short term, you're looking at where it's in the long term. It also can tell a really good story if it's looking a little tight in that first or second year as to this is what it looks like over a longer period. So it might be tighter for a year or two, but you can see it easing over time if we follow our plan here. So it's really quite complementary to that budgeting and what the bank's used to seeing. It actually shows that longer period outlook. And for you as a farmer, it's actually quite good to look at where you want to get to, as opposed to the short term and what does just next year look like.
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so hopefully Chris and Raymond have been able to show how using Figured brings Xero reports really more industry specific around farming in terms of cash flow and understanding how a farm business operates rather to Xero, which is really a commercial product. We're now going to hand over to Adam, I think, with PaySauce.
Yes, thanks, Mike. So we'll just jump into looking at PaySauce now. So PaySauce is your fully cloud-based payroll system. It's focused itself on the rural community. So it's there to just make paying staff nice and easy, but it's also fully compliant with IRD. So you'll know that your holiday pay and your annual leave balances, they've all been correctly calculated. So PaySauce has worked really closely with MBIE and just other payroll consultants to ensure their leave accruals are worked out properly, which can be quite complex with a lot of the rural sort of extras. So, I mean, how many of you are checking over peak times against the minimum wage? At the forefront of the system is the minimum wage top up, where PaySauce will just automatically top up the pay so that you are meeting that minimum wage requirement. So overall, that means for you is that the two main features of it is that you're always going to be meeting that compliance requirement. So we'll just quickly jump into the system as an overview. So we'll start best with the contract builder. So this is specifically a feature to PaySauce, and for federated farmers out there, you'll receive a significant discount on using it. You can populate rural industry specific contracts that then can be emailed directly out to new employees. They can then sign them digitally, and then on the return of that, you can click a button to just drag that information straight back into PaySauce, and then it's already ready for you to run them in your next pay run. You can then save the contracts as a template for use at a later date, but you can also save their contract to should it ever be requested again. So then the system is laid out nice and easy to follow. Whilst it's still packed full of features, there's some good automation ones in there to really try and make this part of running your farm as easy and as quick as possible. So PaySauce will start out as being a pay intermediary. So what that means is once you close off a pay in the pay run, they can then direct debit all the payments to your individual employees, as well as holding the money for the IRD, so that when it comes to PAYE time, they can pay the payment for you. They will also file all your necessary documents for your payday filing. So this is now a point that you don't even have to really remember about. You can switch that part of the feature off if you really want to as well. So one of the most appealing parts of the system is that it's specifically designed to also be run on a mobile application. So your employees can create and submit their timesheets through the app. And that means you only have to review what's coming through just for that reasonableness. They can also check their current balances of leave and request leave through the app. And they can also view previous pay slips just in case they need that for their own bank confirmation. Just on also a side note for PaySauce is that it also integrates with Cash Manager. So for those of you not on Xero, it will still help out on that side of it as well. So I'll just wonder if there's any questions on that PaySauce there, Mike?
Yep. Just one quick query. So you talk about it being a payroll intermediary. So what you're saying is it pays the wages and pays the PAYE at the same time. So do you still have to file your monthly PAYE slips?
No, so obviously the system will automatically push every document required straight to the IRD for you. So especially if you've got automation on, you can just let it just push all the payments through, push the documents through, and you don't have to worry about pay as much again.
And no more late payment penalties.
No more late payment penalties or interest.
Cool.
Just one item from me there. Can it handle when you've got the scenario where you might have some employees on salaries, some might be on an hourly rate, and then some may be incapable of using the phone app to actually upload their own timesheets? Is it able to deal with a farm that has that kind of employees, all of which?
Yeah, so you can run multiple different pay runs depending on whether you're paying people weekly, fortnightly, or even monthly. You can run different types of payments, so you can have your contractors through to the casual, through to your part-timers and salaried, and you can easily keep a track of them should they be able to push a timesheet to you, or if you were to do it for them. You can easily just enter in hours on the website or on the mobile application and just run it as the overall employer. So there's plenty of customizability of how you run your farm to how you can run your payroll.
Good. Thanks, Adam.
Cool. I will now pass it on to Ray to just take us through Xero just nice and briefly.
Yes, so I'll just briefly skim over Xero, as most of you will probably already be on Xero, but basically Xero is the central hub that connects all the apps that we covered today together. This is where you process your financial data, prepare invoices, and prepare and file your GST returns out of. It's cloud-based, so anyone can access it at any time as long as you have an internet connection. And it also streamlines the annual accounts preparing process, as all of the data is readily available at year end, and you can actually prepare the financial statements straight out of Xero. And this avoids having to export your data out from one system, say Cash Manager, sending that to us, the accountants, and then us inputting it into our system. So it just sort of stops that double handling process and just streamlines that whole process and makes it just easier for everyone.
Cool. So if we just move on to just how the flow of data works and just why it's there to make your life simpler. So the app stack of Hubdocs, PaySauce, and Figured all have really easy to set up integrations that push the data down into Xero essentially. The benefit of that is that you can just avoid doing that double entry. So all the data is in each system essentially. Hubdocs will push those bills and receipts down ready for your reconciliation against bank transactions. Then Figured just can pull and push all the transactions so that you can keep a track of all the stock and farming expenditure. And then PaySauce will just essentially sit to the side where it can push just those farming wages into Figured to give you that overall farming picture, but will also able to push your full wage into Xero for that easy reconciliation. The overall ease of this data flow means that you can easily keep Xero up to date and ready to produce those financial reports should you ever need that sort of funding pop up, or you can just realize that there's just going to be those time-saving freedoms that come about from that. So we'll just move on and see if there's any more open questions.
No, I think that's all the questions at this stage. Thanks, Adam.
No, we've got that all done. So I will now move on to Mike, who can just summarize where we're going to next and what it all means.
Righto. Yep. Thanks, Adam. Look, I appreciate there's probably a lot of information that we've gone over the last half hour, but so I guess as a quick summary, basically one of the products is this online filing cabinet, which is Hubdocs, and the real advantage people are using this is that we can get rid of all that book paperwork and things that's lying around your office, kitchen table, or wherever it is, and also ensure that you're ready, should there be a GST audit or if you need it for other things such as environmental plans, all the information is in one place. So that was the first part. The second part, I guess, is around the whole Figured software. And while Xero is good for doing the GST and all your accounting compliance, it's not industry specific. And I guess that's where Figured comes in terms of the budgeting and reporting and the 5-year scenario plans, which is all stuff that you can then use with the bank to actually have a stronger relationship with the bank and give them, mitigate some of that risk in terms of their borrowing profile. And then I guess the final area is the PaySauce software, which is a really simple and easy way for paying your staff, ensuring you're meeting your minimum wages, and also linking up with the Federated Farmers employment agreements, which are pretty standard now across the industry, to ensure that you're being compliant and doing all that. So hopefully that gives a quick summary of where it is. I guess to where to now, we're conscious that people will be at different stages. So if there's anything you particularly want to talk about in the meantime, then feel free to contact any of us.